Welcome into this very special episode of CountryWide, where we're going to be talking all about Halter. And Halter is a global leader in virtual fencing and herding for dairy and beef cows, with now over 600,000 collars, would you believe it, on dairy and beef cows, not just in New Zealand, but in 20 states across the USA, Tasmania and Queensland and Australia, and of course, more states and countries to follow, but proudly based here in New Zealand. The heart of Halter's operating system is the smart collar. We know that, run by an app that lets farmers run the most productive farm by virtual fencing, guiding and monitoring their animals with real-time animal and pasture insights 24/7. Farmers have long sung the praises of the Halter system, saying it saves time and money. But what's exciting to listen to in this episode is now there is an independent evaluation of the return on investment of Halter's technology, which has made measurable productivity, financial, environmental, and lifestyle improvements on New Zealand dairy farms. The study, conducted by leading farm management consultants AgFirst and Transform Agri, analysed 10 high-performing dairy farms across the North and South Island. So on this episode, we're going to go over the results and meet the research leads from both AgFirst and Transform Agri, because the results show that when combined with strong farming management, Halter enables significant gains in pasture utilisation, labour efficiency, animal performance, and environmental outcomes. On average, these gains resulted in an increase in farm profit before tax of more than 13%. So you're sitting up and listening. All right, so we're going to meet our panel. We have James Allen from AgFirst, the research leader, and Julian Gaffney, who is from Transform Agri, the both collectively together, and Steve Crowhurst, who is the head of corporate farming for Halter. So thank you so much to both of you. I'll start with you, Steve. Can you just sort of give our audience, for those who don't know, sort of your background with Halter and what it's been like around that journey of farmers finding that return on investment as you, Halter, have grown?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. My journey with Halter started 6 years ago here in the Waikato, and I was part of the initial rollout of Halter on the farms around our R&D farm in Morrinsville. And basically we progressed from there and expanded across New Zealand and Australia and the other countries you mentioned at the start. I mean, the journey of what was possible with Halter actually started with James and his team at AgFirst, where we actually asked them at the very start to model and sort of predict and put some predictions around what might happen with Halter in the hands of farmers in New Zealand and what it would mean for their pasture-based systems. So, it's really neat to be able to circle back and have that here today with James and Julian, where we've done a study and actually look back on what actually did happen across these farms. And, anecdotally, we hear good things from Halter, and we hear that quite a bit, but, an independent analysis is important, and getting that rigor around it from James and Julian. And for me, most importantly, was actually sort of learning what the farm management changes were with Halter that led to these results. I think that's one of the most important things here, and creating those insights for Halter customers, potential customers, but even the industry, because we have something here that we can really make gains with across our industry.
It must be incredibly rewarding just seeing that unlocking of productivity, Steve. When you looked at who you chose for this, how did you go about choosing a variety of farms? There was 10, I believe, to take part, so that you did get a sort of fair representation.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously we wanted to understand what the impact was, whether it's tangible, intangible, across grass, reproduction, labour, environmental sort of aspects. And in terms of the farms, we really looked for farms that had Halter we tried to get to at least 2 seasons. So we had a few runs on the board to see what's taking place there. Farms that are known to use Halter well, because if we look back at the original purpose of this, which was trying to learn what the management changes are that led to these results, we looked at farms that were already high performing. These are typically the farms that sort of move the industry forward and we can learn off. So we really wanted to see what it looked like where Halter was really deployed to its best of its capabilities. So farms that were already performing at a high level had really strong records prior to Halter going on, because we needed that benchmark pre-Halter and since Halter's arrived. So that's, pasture growth rates, average pasture covers, supplement use, crop use, labour, all of that stuff. And then just really, I've got to thank our farmers because they were comfortable sharing their insights with us and sitting down with the team for us to really dig in and understand what took place. Yeah, spread across New Zealand, spread across systems, and that was really what we were looking for the study.
So, James, you've obviously been involved with Halter in analysing the return on investment, the productivity lifts and shifts, but also mindset, as Steve said there, for quite some time. How did you go about your methodology for this particular independent study?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And as you mentioned, you've been involved with looking at Halter and technology for quite some time. And I suppose it's been quite good to sort of go from an initial, what is our theoretical return on investments and what could this technology do, to actually now validating it and taking it through with good farmers to see what we can do with good technology. So it's been quite the journey and quite satisfying, I suppose, to see some of our initial predictions to actually come through to fruition and say, hey, well, this is being achieved. But to answer your question, standardization of what we were doing was really important, and making sure we just cut out the noise in terms of other things that may or may not have been going on farm. And as you can appreciate, no farm stands still any one year, and there's always something going on. So we needed to exclude anything that wasn't being influenced by Halter, really. And one of the key things, of course, is standardizing the payout, which has a massive impact on farm profitability. So we locked in a standardized payout just to make sure that wasn't influencing results. We looked at how farms were comparing against others in the region, just to get that benchmark. And then we used the FarmX tool there to create a standardized approach to understanding what was going on.
Julian, in the South Island, with regards to standardization, what I would love to understand is, would there be a commonality of who were early adopters as well, and particularly in sort of that Canterbury dairying scenario, to get a fair representation of the sorts of.
Yes, Sarah. Thanks. Yeah, certainly a bit of a common theme amongst those early adopters that you tend to see across, other bits of tech in the ag sector. So it has tended to be the more proactive, higher performing farmers that will look for other opportunities and give things a go. So that's certainly, as far as the farms which, we worked with Steve and got selected, the farmers that are very much focused on getting the bang for their buck out of all of the inputs across their farming system. And, effectively, these guys have seen Halter as being another tool to try to enhance their performance and their profit.
James, 13% is a pretty good lift. And now that we know that you've standardized the results and it isn't interconnected with sort of the times that the report was done in, where did those gains come from, to pick up from what Steve said about those mindset and management shifts?
Yeah, no, great question, Sarah. So there's a number of variables which come into play, but the biggest one really is around the increase in pasture harvested, and that really is driving a lot of the results here. And I suppose, Halter is, I suspect, been initially associated with, it saves a whole lot of labour, and in certain cases that's certainly the case. But I think the magic behind it is seems to be around the micromanagement changes that you can make to increase your pasture harvested, which has a direct correlation with farm profitability. So that's been, to me, the biggest change that we've evidenced across these farms.
And I see here that farms harvested 8.9% more pasture and produced 9.5% more milk solids per hectare. So, Steve, it kind of brings back the fundamentals of farming, that more pasture equals more milk in the vat, which equals more profit.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we've always sort of talked about this, but it really just helps farmers focus on the core principles of a successful farm, or the core farming activities. And that's exactly what we're here to walk alongside farmers to help achieve. So, those gains, if we can do do right by grass and find sort of an unlock there, then that's pretty impactful for our customers. And certainly that's what we're seeing across both hilly farms in the Waikato, farms on the coast down in Southland, right to those, flat irrigated, well set up farms in Canterbury.
Mm. Julian, in your experience over the period of time that you've been both in advisory, but then also with Halter coming on, does these results surprise you that now we're able to focus on the small incremental gains that still lie in dairy farming?
Yes, I have been a bit surprised, to be honest. And going into this, the ethos was that we want to get all the data and we want to make sure we're using a really rigorous standardized approach, and all of the farm productive data, model it in FarmX really well, interview the farmers, make sure that we're not missing anything, and see what numbers come out of it. And I didn't know whether we were going to see the numbers that we saw at all, and if they'd come out kind of flat, that would have been the outcome. My confidence in the use of FarmX, I think, comes from using it for 17 years that I've been consulting, and I know that as a tool for modelling farm systems well, it is really robust. So it gives me a lot of confidence in the numbers that we're seeing come out of this. Yes, a bit of surprise. I think there's a couple of points you've talked about already that Steve just mentioned around hill farms versus flat farms, and I'm seeing already that some of the opportunity around pasture harvested or just efficiency of cow performance even. There's probably a bit more scope on hill farms than there is on flat farms, but we're certainly seeing some quite reasonable productivity lifts on flat farms as well.
James, listeners obviously love averages and benchmarking, but they love the outliers too to see what we can learn from them. I hear there's a farm that jumped 37% in profit.
Yeah, that's right, Sarah. Yeah, we all have an outlier. So I think, to be fair, what we've got there is a combination of technology coming into play with an increased focus, shall we say, on good farm management basics and doing things really well consistently, and quite a significant turnaround. And when we dive a bit deeper into that particular case study, it really was around increased pasture utilisation, doing the basics really, really well. The good old basics of back fencing, of multiple mobs, of multiple shifts to really squeeze every blade of grass out of the farm and into the cow. But also combining with that with increased labour efficiency as well. And it wasn't like the farmer took a slash and burn approach to labour, but certainly there were some labour savings there. And in that particular case study, the constraining factor was actually the size of the cow shed and just constraining thoughts around cow numbers, because it was a smaller shed for a big cow numbers. So by using Halter and just freeing up labour, it let them, in their minds, run a few more animals and increase the stocking rate slightly, which once again lifted the pasture harvested. So sometimes it's quite hard to attribute exactly where did those gains come from. And it goes back to this point, which I think is so important. It's good technology with good farm management and making those micro decisions to get really good results.
That's an interesting point, because technology can't make bad farmers better farmers. They've genuinely got to have the skill set to be able to interpret the opportunities that are in front of them, hey?
Well, to me, Sarah, Halter is like, a number of technologies, but it'll tell you how much feed you've got to feed your cows. It's not going to feed them. That's the manager's decision. So it's a tool to help us make better decisions.
Yeah. Interesting. I just wanted to look at these repo results, Julian. Is that a case of good management or having better insights and data to make decisions off?
Probably a combination, Sarah, but in the whole, the second point, better data and information to make decisions on. Because it's, a study that's across New Zealand, 5 South Island farms, 5 North Island farms, and we're able to compare, 2 seasons pre-Halter to generally the second season post-Halter to take out the noise of the first season. We see a bit of variation, interseasonal variation, but the key thing, I think, in the results is the trend across the broader group, because that's representing range of different farms in different environments, and we can see that on average we've seen some positive results. One thing to keep in mind is that the EBIT calculations don't include any positive benefit from repro gains. So we didn't have, that would take a number of years of data to be able to fully validate. So the EBIT changes relate to basically the running of the farm, less the cost of Halter. And in the case of a few farms where we were able to validate it, some labour savings, but the majority of it is just the result of Halter and increased pasture harvested, increased production per cow and per hectare on some farms, and in some cases reduced supplement use as well.
Yeah, because Steve, on the beauty of Halter with virtual fencing and pasture productivity, animal health data is being in high demand with wearable technologies, and where Halter is and what you're seeing from a corporate farming perspective of the demand, so that because those repo rates and those empty rates are sort of low hanging fruit, aren't they, from an extra EBIT gain?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to be able to have an impact there, but if you think about a farm system, it's not set up in silos. So, there's the other parts of the season that affect the repro results or the peak milk outcomes or all those kind of factors. So I think that's what we're seeing is quite unique is Halter's built in a way that it's not a silo system either, where you have the way the product's set up. We have the feed energy requirements of the animals, how we're feeding them. It's all interlinked to their behaviour data and the animal health data, and then linking into the cycling rates coming into planned starter mating, and then the progress in real time as you flow through. So I think, yes, everyone really we want to get our cows and calf. We want to have decisions around our replacements, but essentially, if you're managing, your stock right across the year, 365 days with the data, with the feeding, with virtual fencing and herding, then you should see those outcomes naturally come to fruition, really. And that's really what we're seeing, and it's quite exciting watching this season progress so far as we use that data really early to give farmers insights to make decisions before their mating seasons even started, to lift their cycling numbers or identify a subgroup of cows that aren't really firing, and then pull them out to the side, get the smart people like Julian and James in to make a recommendation on how best to manage them, and hopefully lift the overall sort of herd cycling results and therefore repro outcomes. So it's pretty exciting what we're seeing.
James, how do you go about advising farmers that are kind of overwhelmed around how to use Halter? And from the farms that you looked at in the study, give us some insight into who's getting the most out of it and how they're getting the most out of it.
Yeah. So how to get the most out of it? It's like any piece of new technology in a way. If you just put it on your farm like a fancy new tractor and you treat it like a Massey 35, you're not going to get the benefits. But you've increased the cost structure on your farm. So the point is you've got to do things differently, and you've got to work to get the benefits from that technology. So the point there is, if you're going to do what you've always done, is this technology right for you? You've got to think differently and make the most of it. And what does that mean? What we saw come through in the case studies is farmers were just using the data and looking at it closely and making more accurate management decisions, and often quicker as well. Anecdote, which comes back to me from one of the case study farms, is he had maybe 60 hectares of silage to be made, but because he had up-to-date daily information on his covers and growth rates and so forth, and he, the day the chopper was in, he made the call to harvest another 20 hectares. So those sort of on-the-fly decisions do become a little bit easier when you've got good information. So I think that's the one. It's adaptability, it's quicker decision making, but also going back to some of the basics around, like I mentioned before, around back fencing and so forth. Those micro adjustments and refinements of pasture management that we know are important, but we forget about because life is so busy and we just don't have time to do the job properly.
Mm. Julian, I think that from one of the findings here around that labour efficiency, it's sort of not necessarily about freeing up labour units, but when they're fatigued, they're not sort of interested in doing those jobs like putting up a back fence as well and all those extra things. So does that all play into it? Like just how well staff are with the system?
Definitely, Sarah. That was very common in terms of the feedback from the farmers was some of the real positive benefits they've seen with their staff in terms of engagement. So James is just talking about the farmers that are really apply themselves to learning the tech, and that transfers across to the staff as well. So those farms that perform really well with Halter have got all their staff really well engaged, and it actually provides a platform to engage them too. So, and just taking away that fatigue a bit, if you can go from 55 hours a week on average to 47, something like that, a few more sleep-ins, that makes a big difference. And there's a bit of a redistribution of labour as well. So we've seen that staff get freed up to do perhaps higher value tasks as opposed to just shifting breaks and getting cows in and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I saw that in the report, Julian, where you see the time being redistributed to the feeding the animal basically and monitoring grass conditions, and I guess essentially leading to more consistent feeding is what I saw come through in a lot of the case studies. Is that fair to say?
Yep, definitely. I think it comes back to the engagement of the farmers is really essential. That then that carries over to the staff as well. And it gives everyone a tool to see what's happening on the farm at any one time, where everything is, and what state they're in. So yeah, that's pretty cool information to have, and we're certainly seeing these farms maximise the value that they're getting out of that.
Anything that stood out for you, both Julian and James? I'll start with you, James, just on animal health improvements and animal welfare, that you can see that reduced stress and animals that are better well fed going to be sort of that future productivity gain for the sector?
Yeah, I think I've certainly seen that across the farms that I've been involved with. So farms that are on Halter, it's quite interesting just seeing cow behaviour. It's quite different when you go into a paddock. They no longer see you as a source of potential food, or that they just react quite differently. So the cows seem to be less stressed. As far as having that information and alerts on animal health, if there's any major changes in animals, that certainly is, from what I've seen, it's reducing potential wastage or losses of animals that wouldn't normally get picked up. James, you might have a bit to add in. Yeah.
No, I think that's covered it well, Julian. But Halter, but all of the collars are introducing a whole new way of us looking at the cow in terms of rumination data. And, that's never been available to us at this level of detail. And I think for any collar, it does take a bit of getting used to what does it mean? How do I interpret it? What decisions do I need to make? So I think the entire industry is going through this process now of working out what's important, what's not important with rumination data, and back to your point around animal welfare and animal health. And I reckon we're just at the start of really unpacking what that will mean. And I'm quite sort of excited to see this journey over the next decade, where it's going to take us.
Yeah, I think often, Steve, about what farmers are going to be learning around distance walked, where paddocks they are in the afternoon versus the morning, that sort of lameness and those sort of different feeding decisions based on the animal health and stress, and interconnect it with like the farm management as opposed to sort of a one size fits all.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. A lot of statements through the report was saying that these farmers were looking at rumination and activity times and really using that to make decisions around feeding. And there was one farm in the Manawatu that managed to lift intake, but also increase resting time by monitoring the real-time behaviour of each mob, which was really interesting. And you talked about walking distance. One thing that we put in front of farmers is an energy requirement calculator or information. So, farmers set up the energy requirements relative to the desired or targeted milk output. And we can really see from all the pasture being offered, the supplement being offered, whether cows are actually getting the right energy requirements relative to how far they walk, because we can tell farmers how far cows walk. And often it's quite a lot further than you think. And we've seen the bump in energy that this is flagged and needed actually change the behaviour of the mob when you actually offer a little bit more to account for that extra distance that they've been walking that we actually weren't aware of. Yeah, we're actually seeing a lot of that taking place now, and it's pretty exciting with where that's going to progress to and what it means for the herds and animals on farm.
what would you do if you had to run this research again, Steve?
Good question. I mean, we'd love to run it wider, of course, and we'll actually keep adding on and adding each season on with these farms to watch their progress. And by all accounts, they've continue to see some favourable results, which is really cool. There was a lot of mention in the report around environmental practices and gains there, around wintering practices and just generally having the flexibility to have your stock and I guess parts of the paddock you weren't sort of able to manage before Halter, and that's leading to better outcomes for the environment. So I think we could probably have a look at that. But just interested to see where these well set up farms in Canterbury can take it, because those early results are pretty exciting. And hey, maybe there's like a new level of a new sort of ceiling of productivity that we could maybe aspire to for our industry, which is what we're all looking for as our sort of herd size remains relatively static.
Hey, I don't mean this in any jest, but there must have been a bit of North Island, South Island competition going on between you two on the results, Julian and James.
Well, as a true Chiefs supporter, absolutely. These flat farmers in Canterbury, it's just all too easy, isn't it? So let's make it a bit more challenging on real farms up here, where we have to cope with climatic variation and a few more hills.
That's why we had a couple of hill farms on there, James. So and one on the coast down in Southland. So yeah, I think we leveled it up a bit, but overall it's hard to say. We haven't actually picked a winner between North Island and South Island, so we'll leave that for another day, I think.
It was quite neat seeing some insights from a farm that went through those drought conditions too, Sarah, and what they were able to sort of mitigate through that period. So yeah, I think maybe up north we do a little bit tougher.
Yeah, and I was just actually leading into that, because you haven't just done a 49-page report, put it up online and throwing around a few numbers. In the link of this description below, as well as on the halterhq.com website /ROI, you've actually got the individual reports and the names and the whole detail around each of the farms, so that farmers can go and probably find someone close by and start to benchmark them. Steve, is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, every farm system's different. So we did our best to try and get a variety so people can take some cues and learn some things. So, that's the plan. That it's all there to download and have a good look through. And, a wider data set would always be great. And, if we can provide more in the future, we'd love to. But essentially, jump on the website under the dairy menu and really get stuck in to see what those management changes were that led to these really exciting outcomes.
Julian, where would you like to take it in terms of the scale of the research? Obviously more farms, but how to make it meaningful on a sustainable, ongoing level for data?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Sarah. That the challenging part is, you can measure a farm pre-Halter, and then you can measure it post-Halter. But the challenge is, it's always going to be with Halter from there on in. So it's a little bit hard to have, to basically to be able to cancel out what effect it's having. What I would say though is I think that there's quite a few elements of potential farm performance and productivity that haven't been picked up in this study, that over a 3 to 5 year period, I expect we'll see some significant benefits coming out on top of what we've measured here. So that's pretty cool. That's exciting, and you would like to see us be able to broaden the parameters in terms of the whole wintering piece as well, the environmental, some of those benefits too. So hopefully we can do that as we go forward.
James?
What I would love to see over the coming years, I suppose, is, as Steve touched on, just tracking these existing farms to see how the results are they embedded and what sort of changes occur. But really diving into the management changes every year and how we're adapting as we get more information, because Halter won't sit still, that the industry doesn't sit still, and what new developments come with that. And I'm convinced that we can extract more productivity from our farms with a lower footprint, but we're going to have to do it smarter. So this is just an enabler to help do that. So tracking those performances and particularly around the environmental stuff, as Steve mentioned, I think will be really interesting.
Julian, I'm just interested in the environmental application. I saw it in a few different places where it's about keeping them out of waterways and, just monitoring nitrogen usage. When we have a increased pressure for proof in the environmental space, how do you think, just looking at the study of the farmers that you looked at, are going to be really well prepared for data?
Yeah. I think it is going to set them up well in terms of that proof of being able to prove that the animals haven't been in critical source areas and things like that. So maybe a bit of work that needs to do around making sure that those records are available and kind of accumulate behind the scenes, which Steve might be able to talk to perhaps. But yeah, I think it's going to be really valuable because that's what we need. We need to be able to prove that we can keep animals out, and it's not only to prove it; it's to actually do it because that's what makes the difference and gets better environmental outcomes. So, yeah, seeing that ability with Halter is absolutely unique in terms of a piece of technology. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think being able to do it first, what you said there, Julian, is the key point, and then subsequently being able to prove it. And I think, and which can obviously happen with this system. And I think what's exciting is that we can use this data to prove we're doing great things on farm and perhaps create better outcomes or revenue streams or prove how good New Zealand farmers are with this data. I think typically data is looked at a different way, but I think we can share that success with this data and improve our value across the supply chain. So yeah, we've got all the data there. It's accumulated, and yeah, who knows where we can take it next. The good thing about what you said before, Sarah, is Halter's based in New Zealand, and our feedback comes in thick and fast from our farmers, and they know we're able to adapt relatively quickly. Yep, our New Zealand farmers will always have the edge, especially when our origins originate in Morrinsville there.
Yeah, absolutely. James, what excites you sort of in the environmental evidence space and where it can evolve?
Yep. So the guys have already mentioned around waterways and so forth, and just that validation of what we're doing. So I think that becomes a bit of a given in due course. But to me, it comes down to the micro improvements that we're going to be able to make and then prove. And just to explain, we do get incidences of pugging on dairy farms or compaction and weather events and so forth. And with this type of technology, we can prove that we've shifted animals to shelter or away from the waterways or away from harm or whatever the case may be. So it does come to almost proof of placement of where your animal is at any time. But further to that, looking at the productivity side of it, I think of this type of technology is the precision ag of pasture. And so, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, every farmer knew every cow by name and every paddock by name. And now we're managing by herd and by paddock by number. But now we're going full circle where we can manage the cow individually. And I want us to get to manage the paddock per square metre. And this is where I'm coming to, with these micro improvements, rather than saying we've got a 5 hectare paddock growing X tons of grass, let's dive much, much deeper and get every part of that paddock growing to its maximum. And that's when we're really winning with this stuff, both from a production and an environmental viewpoint.
Hmm.
Yeah, James, I'm just recollecting one of your comments in the Manawatu farm where they graze back to front in winter. So cows into the paddock and the halter guides into the back of the paddock. So that just has a protected compaction and pugging. So yeah, a couple of people trying some things already. I think there was instances of instead of braked crossways across the paddock, long ways down the sides of the paddocks to transfer that nutrient and just have some new capabilities. So there are already some instances coming through that you guys captured, which was cool.
Mm.
And Steve, what's interesting to me is that, it's the farmers coming up with these creative ideas of different ways of doing things, isn't it? And they're learning from each other and sort of building on each other, which is really exciting.
Totally. It's just the way farmers go about their work. I remember when we first started out with the system and built it to be able to be updated relatively quickly with the engineering team building product off feedback from farmers. look, that's what really drove the success of Halter and helped us get where we got to was walking alongside our farmers and literally building product with them along the way. And that was pretty special to see it taking place. Yeah, like I said before, the Kiwi farmers are going to keep driving that. And yeah, who knows what's going to pop up in the app in the coming months for them off the back of that feedback. Yeah, pretty neat bunch of people to be working with, neat customer to be collaborating with to build product with. It's really cool.
Julian, would you have any parting words on farmers that are curious about Halter and what to think through before they sort of reach out?
Yeah, sure. I think they're going to look at their farm and really think about the performance of it and how much opportunity there is. They've also got to look at, how they want to be farming and their enjoyment of farming, because what I've actually seen is that quite a few of these farmers say they're actually enjoying farming a lot more with it, which is quite interesting, getting the ability to actually go on holiday a bit more, things like that. So talk to some other farmers as well, because the farmers that are using it will tell them a whole lot more than we can tell them from a study like this.
James, your advice?
Yep. Well, there's a report there to read. So, the farmers who helped us, put a lot of time into to build this up, and there is some really interesting insight there. So, if anyone is interested, yes, certainly download the report, as you mentioned, download the case studies, and that then comes to making an informed decision, because any type of technology, I hear it all the time. People are sort of talking to someone else and they tend to sort of make pretty quick or rash decisions based on someone else's opinion rather than actually digging deep. So it's an investment here. It's not cheap, but the value's there if you get it right. It's just taking the time to make an informed decision would be my request.
And what would you say, Steve, to round us out for in all your learnings of sort of farmers adopting technology, and particularly Halter?
Oh, I just think what we've sort of said already is really getting behind. You've got this system in your hand, and the important part of the study was how do you use it to get these really neat results. The general theme is really just the whole team getting behind it and willingness to sort of challenge management decisions, and I guess the typical strategy of managing the mobs or managing the farm day to day. And that's what I'd sort of would really kind of say to people that have Halter in their hands or looking to get Halter in their hands. The case studies are all there, like James said. I think these two are very experienced after doing the study on how to get the best out of Halter and lead to these outcomes. So I guess chatting to your consultants and your vets who are quite familiar with, nutritionists who are quite familiar with Halter now, as we've got quite a large spread across New Zealand. So reach out to your trusted advisor and then come and have a chat to us and find out how it works within your business goals. And phone numbers are on the website for the people local if they want to come around and have a cup of tea and a biscuit.
Well, I tell you what, that's not too hard to get in touch with someone from Halter because I see the trucks absolutely everywhere, Steve. So you just flag them down on the side of the road. They're but of course, you head to halterhq.com /ROI. Link is going to be in the description below. So if you're really seriously about increasing pasture eaten, milk solids per hectare and lifting that profit per tax, then of course you've got to seriously have a deep dive into this independent study, return on investment for 10 Halter dairy farms. And of course, if you want to deep dive in further into farms within your particular region, then you can do so as well. Thank you very, very much to the three of you. It's been a really great yarn about unlocking productivity across New Zealand dairy farms. And I'm excited to see for who have listened to this and where it takes their farm forward. So thank you very much to Steve Crowhurst from Halter, James Allen from AgFirst, and Julian Gaffney from Transform Agri. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it.